Shalom, dear friend from Jerusalem. Shalom, with love from Jerusalem. Shalom, dear friend, Yehudah Glick from the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation in Jerusalem. We are on the daily chapter. We are studying these words with so much love. Oh, we love hearing the words of God from the Bible. It's unbelievable. It's really incredible how just to listen to the words of the Torah. Today we're studying Genesis chapter 2. And I first want to thank you all for your comments. Wow. It is so great. Every single one of you sends me a comment. It's just it makes me excited. And those of you who are not aware, the best way to send me a comment is on my email. It's yehudah.glick@shalomjerusalem.org. You can send it at yehudah.glick@shalomjerusalem.org. Yehudah is Y-E-H-U-D-A-H. .glick is G-L-I-C-K at shalomjerusalem.org. Yehudah, Y-E-H-U-D-A-H. .glick, G-L-I-C-K at shalomjerusalem.org. But we are back. Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2 is a very famous chapter among the researchers, the academic world dealing with the Torah. Because in Genesis chapter 2 we read a story that supposedly contradicts Genesis chapter 1. And because of that we see that many of the intellectuals who are studying the Torah said, here, we prove that the Torah is not one unit. It's divided into several different units. It has several different origins. And these are the critics of the Bible. But of course, the Bible has various different perspectives, various different points of view. And just like mankind is not one dimension, so too is the Torah, when referring to mankind, won't tell the story of mankind in one dimension. So here we are today learning chapter 2, which is a new story of the creation of the world. And let's first begin at just looking at the different things that differ between chapter 1 and chapter 2. We can even start from the very first beginning. We'll be starting to read from chapter 2, verse 4, because the first 3 verses of chapter 2 actually are the end of the story of creation from chapter 1. And therefore, these ele toldot hashamayim v'haaretz bi'baram b'yom asot Adonai Elohim eretz hashamayim. We're talking about the creation of the world. In chapter 1, the Creator, his name was Elohim, God. God in the plural, but it's God. In the plural because of the dignity, the honor. His honor is God, Elohim. In chapter 2, it doesn't talk about Elohim. It talks about Adonai Elohim. Adonai is usually God's first name, and that's the way we pronounce the God's name, as spelled Y-H-W-H, it's Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. The 4 letters of God's name, that they come from when God speaks to Moses and Moses says, who are you? And he says, I am who I am. And the Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey actually represent was, am, will be, past, future, present. And those are the words of in Hebrew we would say past is haya, future is yihyeh, and present is hoveh. And all those 3 together, put together, are the words Yud Hey, the letters Yud Hey Vav Hey. That's God's eternal name. It's also his private name. Elohim is sort of a general name. God created nature. In chapter 2, we're talking about Adonai Elohim. There's a dialogue between God and man. Chapter 1, there's no dialogue. There is one sentence where God says, shall we create man, or let's create man. But there's no real dialogue. There's nobody talking and answering. In chapter 2, we already have dialogue between God and man. Chapter 2, what happens is that there's nothing exists because it says, because man has not yet been created to work, to serve the land. But we know that in chapter 1, man was created last. In chapter 2, man was created first. That's interesting. So God creates man and puts in him, blows in him, like, well, sort of what you can think of it when they're making, if you ever go to a factory where they make glass, you see that they have this, they blow and it blows up. And so God blows from himself into mankind, and he creates mankind. And now there's a man who's created in God's image who can actually have a dialogue with God. And God doesn't only create man, but he says man will now be a living soul. And he plants a garden in Eden. And maybe many people would think, garden in Eden, wow, paradise, sitting and doing nothing and just enjoying and just sitting with a cup of wine and just enjoying the environment of the birds and the trees. But the Torah tells us that in the Garden of Eden, man was told, God put him into verse 15, God put man into the Garden of Eden to serve it and protect it. So man had to work there. It wasn't sitting doing nothing. As a matter of fact, in chapter 1, where it doesn't mention paradise, man didn't have any mission. It's just, you rule over the whole thing. So maybe this world is different. But let's go back to the chapter 2. We said that God plants. First he creates man, then he plants a garden. And from the garden comes up trees, beautiful trees. And there's a river divided into 4. The names of the river are names that we are familiar with. The Ephrata, the various different rivers that are around in what's called Mesopotamia, which is there where the Gulf is, the Persian Gulf, and the other 2 rivers are sort of the Nile and different channels of the Nile. So we have the area of Egypt on the one side, the area of Babylon on the other side, and actually it's sort of a hint that Israel is the actual Garden of Eden. Man is put there, and God tells him. And many people think, well, what God tell man? He told him, you can't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. But that's not what he told him. First he told him, from all the trees of the garden you shall eat. The man was commanded, the first commandment that God told man, eat. Enjoy what I created. I created it for you. I created it for you, so you enjoy it. Yeah, man, God wants us to enjoy this world. God created this world for us to enjoy it, not to ruin it. We have to serve it, protect it, not to ruin it. But God put us in this Garden of Eden and told us he wants only good for us. And therefore he told us, do not eat from the tree of knowledge, good and bad. I believe that it's actually telling mankind not to eat yet from knowledge of good and bad, because in order to get into understanding knowledge of good and bad, you have to have the maturity needed. You cannot right away, a child when he's just born, you can't put him into university. You can't marry him. You can't tell him to run his life, to run his financial life. God says, listen, the time is not yet there. The time will come. But meanwhile, right now, enjoy your youth age. Enjoy being a child. Children don't have the sexual temptation. Children are not yet developed in terms of decision making. Just enjoy the world of being a child. So we're gonna about what happens. We're gonna talk about in the next chapter, in chapter 3. But here, meanwhile, man is really so satisfied and so happy. But then God looks at man and he sees, for the first time, God says, if in chapter 1 God said, Tov, everything he sees is Tov. He looks at the trees, it's Tov. He looks at the sky, it's Tov. Everything is Tov, is good, everything is good. In chapter 2, the first time God says, Lo Tov. Lo Tov heyot Adam levado. It's not good for man to be alone. Lo Tov. It's not good. Many people expect, well, therefore he created women. He created a wife, he created Eve. But that's not what happens. The first option for man to redeem himself from loneliness was actually God created the animals, created the creatures, the birds, and man, Adam, calls them by names them, gives them an identity. He looks at the zebra and he says, wow, this is a zebra. He looks at the cat. He says, wow, this is a cat. He looks at the ant and he gives him a name. And he gives a name to every one of the creatures. He looks at him. You know, it's something we can tell, we can describe something. Listen, this guy has red hair. He weighs 200 pounds. Or I can just say his name. Saying his name is everything about him. And it's looking and respecting. Soldiers you refer to them by the numbers. But when you respect something, you give it a name, you call it something. And God was checking the opportunities, the alternatives of who will redeem mankind from his loneliness. Nothing worked until God put Adam to sleep. And I keep saying man into Adam, man, because the word in Hebrew, Adam, is man. He puts Adam to sleep, and he takes a part from him, and he creates Isha. And Adam wakes up, and he sees it, and he's so excited. This is what I've been waiting for. He is so thankful. He feels this is it. This is it. And the Torah announces, and therefore, man leaves his house, leaves his father and mother, the natural source of a man, and he clungs to his wife. And they're one flesh. This is the first community a person lives in. A family. And the first beginning of a family is the anniversary. The day they got married. Even when you have children, some people celebrate their anniversary and they say, oh, it's a wonderful thing, me and my wife met at that time. But an anniversary is not just between you and your wife, it's the birthday of a new family. A new family has been born in the world. Yeah. God taught us the basic of humankind is not to be alone. The basic of humankind is to establish a family. To be there where there will be somebody he can share things with, somebody who will make him fruitful, and they together as one will be fruitful. They will look at the world in different perspectives and create something new. They will be like God, the Creator. And this is such a basic value in the Torah. The Torah begins with it. Man is a family person. Yes, we're living in a time where family is at stake. But God says, you want to know what paradise is? Paradise is to work and protect the trees, protect the garden, and protect the couplehood and family. This is the basic idea. We're going to have to teach it to the world. We're going to have to bring it about to the world. Family is paradise. Love and respect between husband and wife is the basic of family. It is a crucial part of our personality. I'm blessing each and every one of you to find your soulmate and have a family and begin and live a life of sanctity to God. I'm blessed. I'm privileged. I'm married to the most wonderful wife, Hadass. I was married beforehand to my wonderful wife, Yafi, who passed away. I was a widow. And then I remarried. Nothing greater in this world than family. Nothing greater in this world than couplehood. We're going to teach that to the world. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love you all. Man and wife were so simple to each other. They didn't even care about their nakedness until something happens, which we'll read about tomorrow. God bless you all. Genesis chapter 2. Share it with your friends. Share with me your remarks, comments. I love you, and Shalom from Jerusalem.